So now one of the most important aspects as it pertains to the success of a freight broker or a trucking business is you must understand the rate game. If you get this part right, you win. If you get it wrong and get it wrong long enough, you lose. That's simple. So in today's video, we're discussing the often controversial topic of should freight brokers be required by law to share their rates with carriers that they are being paid by shippers in specific lanes. So let's get into the business. So now before we get started, I just want to say that I encourage conversation around this topic. I'm not saying that I know it all and I have the answer for everything, but I do have an opinion on this particular topic. So I came here to share that opinion. That's it. So if it stands opposite of where you stand, if you see it differently, please go ahead and share it in the comments with us. Let us know what you think and why you see it the way that you see it. And that way we can have a better understanding of each other. So now how did we get to this point? And I don't want to make it seem as if we just got here. We've been here. If you take a look at the movie Godfather Part 2, there's a scene in that movie where Michael Corleone expresses a gripe with Hyman Roth. And he gets pretty charged up about it. And Hyman Roth looks at Michael and he says, "This is the business we've chosen." And then he says to Michael, "If I wake up in the morning and the money is on the table, I know we have a deal. If it's not, I know we don't." And it's the same with brokers, shippers, and carriers. This is the business we've chosen. And nobody is forcing you to come into these relationships. It's a world of free enterprise where private businesses compete against one another for market share, and we choose to work with who we want to work with. Shippers choose to work with brokers, brokers choose to work with carriers, and carriers choose to work with brokers. That's just how it goes. It's a choice in the matter. So now that brings us to how we got here. When the left don't know what the right is doing, meaning carriers don't know what shippers are paying for rates, and then suddenly the rates plummet, you have carriers start to question rates, question whether or not they're being treated fairly by the broker, and then start to think that they're being price gouged. And then it's just a matter of time before the cry gets louder and louder for brokers to have to share their rates. But just because the cry gets louder doesn't mean that brokers should have to share their rates. So that's what we're getting ready to talk about now. So now I can see that I'm a freight broker, so my opinion may be biased toward freight brokers. But no, I don't think that freight brokers should be mandated to share their rates with carriers that they are receiving from shippers in specific lanes. To me, that tears away at the fabric of capitalism. And not only that, the main problem that I have with it is one of the hardest parts of the trucking or the freight broker business is to go out and procure freight. There's nothing easy about that. So what this is saying is basically that I'm going to go out and do all of the hard work, get the freight, and then I have to go and share with the carrier what the shipper is paying me for the freight. That just doesn't make sense to me. Why does it matter what the shipper is paying me? When the carrier does his homework, he knows what it's going to cost him in order to move his truck from point A to point B, and he knows how much money he wants to make. So whatever I get should be irrelevant to the carrier. The carrier should be concerned about what is a good amount for me to get in this lane and negotiating for that amount, because the carrier has a right to refuse any load. So I don't see any reason why I should have to share what my prices are in specific lanes. As a matter of fact, how I see it, if the carrier wants to know how much a shipper is paying in a lane, then he should go direct to the shipper and procure his own freight. Don't wait for the broker to go to the shipper to get the freight. Don't wait for the broker to go and do all of the hard work and then say, "Hey, you should show me what your rates are." No, just go straight to the shipper and procure your own freight and kick the broker out of the equation altogether. But you don't want to kick the broker out of the equation because you realize the value of the broker's service. If there was no value there, then you wouldn't use the freight broker. But the broker solves a problem that your business has every single day. In order for your truck to make money, your wheels need to be turning. And if you don't have freight, your wheels are not turning. So the broker solves that problem for you. To this point, you haven't shown the ability to go out and get your own freight for whatever reason. Maybe you don't have the time and resources to commit to going out and getting freight. You can't do it. Whatever the reason is, you haven't done that to this point. You give that responsibility to a freight broker. But then what carriers want to do is control how much money a freight broker can make. They want to be able to see the money that freight brokers make. And I just don't see why that's necessary. Because if a trucker is really minding his own business, tending to his business, and doing his homework, there would be no need for him to know what a broker is getting in a lane. Because what's most important to the trucker is how much is it going to take for him to be profitable in that lane. So now the next reason why I don't think a freight broker should have to show a carrier what a shipper is paying in a lane is because it doesn't make for an even playing field. Doesn't make for transparency except for on one side, from the broker to the carrier. But what about from the broker to the shipper? Does the broker get a chance to go to the shipper and say, hey, I want to know what you've been paying in lanes for the last 6 months? No, because it will kill the spirit of good business, kill the spirit of good competition, going out and competing in those lanes to get the best prices. I don't need to go to the shipper and ask what they're paying for lanes, although I might do that sometimes. They have the choice of telling me or not telling me, but if they don't tell me, it's perfectly fine. I know what it costs me to get a lane move from point A to point B. I know what it's going to take for me to be profitable, so that's all I need to know. So now another reason why I don't think the freight broker should have to show the carrier what the shipper is paying in the lane is because the broker doesn't work for the carrier. The carrier doesn't pay the broker's salary. The carrier is not paying half of the broker's Social Security and Medicare tax. If it can be said that the broker works for anybody, it would be the shipper through the carrier. And even that statement wouldn't be accurate, because although the shipper, the broker, and the carrier are working together to get loads moved from point A to point B, they're independent of each other. And I can assure you that the shipper, the broker, and the carrier have their own best interests in mind. So now another reason why carriers say they should have access to what shippers are paying in lanes is because they are paying a fee to the broker and they should know what that fee is. Now, technically speaking, the carrier is not paying a fee to the broker. The broker is going in front of the carrier and getting the freight and then selling that freight to the carrier or negotiating with that carrier to move that freight. So there's not a fee really involved for you to know how much the broker is charging you. The broker is not really charging you anything. The broker is bringing you freight and saying, hey, I have this freight moving from point A to point B and I want to move it at X amount of dollars. Then you come in and you say, hey, I agree to move it at that number, or this is the number that I can move it at. But there's no fee really involved that the broker is charging the carrier. So now the final reason that I'll share why freight brokers shouldn't have to share the rates with carriers that shippers are paying in lanes is because it gives the carrier too much control over the rate and how much money a freight broker can make. You see, a freight broker doesn't necessarily determine how much money is in the lane. The market determines that. The market says that a particular lane is going for X amount of dollars based off of the different dynamics in that lane. Now, what this says is that the freight broker determines it. So now what the carrier does is he just bases his rate off of whatever the freight broker has in the lane. But what if the freight broker's rate is too low? Then what do we do? It's about accountability, giving everybody responsibility. Just like I have a responsibility to go in and do my homework and provide a rate to the shipper that's a decent rate that works for the shipper, the carrier should have that same responsibility to go in and do his homework, figure out what works for him, what works for his company, and go with whatever rate that is. And to not have an expectation that the broker's rates are going to be given to you, because the broker's rates don't solve the problem. What solves this problem is you. The only person that can be accountable and responsible for your company's profitability is you. So now I get it. I know that my opinion probably won't be the most popular amongst some carriers. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But the idea here is to create a dialogue so that truckers can better understand brokers and brokers can better understand truckers. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have good and bad characters on both sides. Sometimes you're going to have brokers that try and take advantage of carriers at every turn, and vice versa. That's the business we've chosen. Our responsibility is to go into this space and find the best people to work with and build relationships with those people. So now I'm kind of like Hyman Roth from The Godfather Part 2 in a sense. If I see the rate confirmation and the carrier package in my email box in the morning, I'll know that I have a partner. If I don't, I'll know that I don't. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope this information has been helpful. If you're interested in learning more about the freight broker business, how it works, you want to see when someone else do it, watch me move freight, talk to shippers, talk to carriers, check out my free 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works, link in the description. And if you want to know more about how you start a conversation with a shipper, you're not quite sure what to say, check out my free video titled What Do I Say to Shippers? And until the next time, see you at the top, because the bottom is much too crowded.